Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Sterling Enterprises boardroom as Ethan Caldwell stared out at the Seattle skyline, his mind far from the quarterly reports spread across the mahogany table. 28 years old and heir to a business empire worth hundreds of millions, Ethan should have been focused on profit margins and market expansion. Instead, all he could think about was the woman who had changed everything, Nora Whitman. Her name alone sent warmth through his chest, a feeling that had grown stronger every day for the past 8 months. From the moment she'd walked into his life as a junior marketing consultant, everything had shifted. Her intelligence was razor-sharp, her laugh infectious, and her refusal to be intimidated by his family's wealth both refreshing and captivating. "Ethan, are you even listening?" His mother's voice cut through his reverie like a blade. Lydia Sterling sat at the head of the table, her platinum blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun, her piercing eyes fixed on him with barely concealed irritation. At 55, she commanded every room she entered, her presence as imposing as the diamond tennis bracelet that caught the light as she drummed her manicured fingers impatiently. "The Peterson merger requires your signature," she continued, sliding a stack of papers toward him. "This deal will expand our Pacific Northwest holdings by 30%. Ethan forced himself to focus on the documents, but his phone buzzed with a text message. Despite his mother's disapproving glare, he glanced at the screen. "Missing you already. Dinadot." A smile tugged at his lips. Nora had left the office early for a dentist appointment, and already the day felt incomplete without her presence. "Who is it?" Lydia's tone was sharp. "No one important," Ethan lied quickly. But Lydia's eyes had already narrowed. She'd built her empire by reading people, by spotting weaknesses, and exploiting them. The look on her son's face told her everything she needed to know. "We need to discuss your future, Ethan. Your grandfather built this company from nothing, and I've tripled its value since taking over. But legacy means nothing if there's no proper heir to continue it." Ethan signed the merger documents without really reading them. "I'm here, aren't I? I'm learning the business. Learning isn't enough. You need to start thinking about marriage, about producing an heir. The Thompson girl would be perfect. Old money, good breeding, the right connections. Mother, don't mother me. You're 28 years old, and I won't have you wasting time with inappropriate relationships." The words hit their mark, and Ethan's head snapped up. What's that supposed to mean? Lydia leaned back in her chair, studying him with the same calculating expression she used during hostile takeovers. "I'm not blind, Ethan. I see how you look at that marketing girl. What's her name?" "Whitman." Ethan's blood ran cold. He'd been careful, or so he thought. Their relationship had started slowly, coffee meetings that turned into dinner dates, business discussions that became personal conversations. They'd kept things professional at the office, but apparently not professional enough. "Nora is a valued employee," he said carefully. "Nora," Lydia repeated, tasting the name like it left a bitter aftertaste. "How quaint. And I suppose you think she cares about you for yourself, not for what you represent." "It's not like that. It's exactly like that. You're worth more money than she'll see in 10 lifetimes. Do you really think she'd give you a second glance if you were pumping gas for a living?" Ethan stood abruptly, anger flashing in his dark eyes. "You don't know her. I know her type. I've seen dozens of them over the years, all circling around you like vultures. Pretty little things with empty bank accounts and big ambitions." "Stop." But Lydia was just getting started. She rose from her chair with predatory grace, moving around the table until she stood directly in front of her son. "She's playing you, Ethan, and frankly, I'm disappointed that you're naive enough to fall for it. I love her." The words hung in the air between them like a declaration of war. Lydia's face went perfectly still, her expression shifting from irritation to something far more dangerous. "Love," she said softly. "How romantic. Tell me, does she love you enough to turn down money? Because I guarantee you, son, everyone has a price." Ethan stepped closer, his voice dropping to a warning tone. "Stay away from her." "Or what? You'll choose her over your family, over everything we've built?" Lydia laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're more like your father than I thought." He was foolish about women, too. The mention of his father, dead for 5 years now from a heart attack, hit Ethan like a physical blow. His parents' marriage had been cold, loveless, more business arrangement than romance. He'd sworn he would never end up like that. "I won't discuss this with you anymore," Ethan said, grabbing his jacket from the back of his chair. "We're not finished here." "Yes, we are." He was halfway to the door when Lydia called out again, her voice carrying across the room with ominous certainty. "If you think I'll stand by and watch you destroy everything we've worked for, you're mistaken." Ethan paused at the door, looking back at his mother. For a moment, he saw past the designer clothes and expensive jewelry to something darker underneath, something that made his skin crawl. "Don't threaten me, Mother, and don't even think about threatening her." He left without another word, but Lydia's voice followed him into the hallway. "I don't make threats, darling. I make promises." 3 hours later, Ethan sat across from Nora at their favorite restaurant, a small Italian place tucked away from the bustle of downtown Seattle. The warm lighting cast a golden glow across her brown skin, and her dark eyes sparkled as she told him about her day. She wore a simple black dress that probably cost less than his mother's daily spa treatments. But she looked more beautiful than any woman he'd ever seen. "You're quiet tonight," she observed, reaching across the table to touch his hand. "Everything okay?" Ethan turned his palm up to catch her fingers, marveling at how perfectly they fit together. "Just work stress, nothing important." But as he looked into her trusting eyes, his mother's words echoed in his mind. "I've protected this family's interests before, and I'll do it again." "Nora," he said suddenly, surprising himself, "what would you say if I told you I wanted to leave Seattle, start fresh, somewhere else?" She tilted her head, studying his face. "I'd say you must have had a really bad day at the office." "Why? Are you thinking about it? Maybe, would you come with me?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications. They'd been together for 8 months, but they'd never talked about the future, never made any real commitments. The intensity in Ethan's voice suggested this was about more than just a career change. "Ethan, what's really going on?" He wanted to tell her everything. About his mother's threats, about the pressure to marry someone appropriate, about the suffocating weight of expectations that had followed him his entire life. But looking at her worried expression, he couldn't bring himself to burden her with the full truth. "I just love you," he said instead, lifting her hand to his lips. "More than I ever thought possible." Nora's face softened, and she leaned forward to kiss him gently. "I love you too. Whatever's bothering you, we'll figure it out together." As they left the restaurant that night, Ethan felt a mixture of hope and dread settling in his chest. He loved Nora with every fiber of his being, and he was beginning to realize that might not be enough to protect her from the storm that was coming. In her penthouse apartment across the city, Lydia Sterling stood at her own window, phone pressed to her ear as she gazed out at the lights of Seattle. "I need you to gather information on someone," she said to the private investigator on the other end of the line. "Everything you can find. Financial records, family background, personal history. I want to know what skeletons are hiding in her closet." She gave him Nora's name and address, then hung up with a satisfied smile. The war for her son's future was about to begin, and Lydia Sterling had never lost a war in her life. Chapter 2. The Ultimatum. 2 weeks had passed since the confrontation in the boardroom, and Lydia Sterling now possessed a thick file containing every detail of Nora Whitman's life. The private investigator had been thorough, perhaps too thorough. What Lydia had expected to find were the usual red flags: debt, a questionable past, evidence of gold-digging behavior. Instead, the report painted a picture of a woman who was frustratingly clean. Nora had grown up in modest circumstances in Portland, the daughter of a nurse and a high school teacher. She'd worked her way through college on scholarships and part-time jobs, graduated summa cum laude with a degree in marketing, and had been steadily climbing the corporate ladder through merit alone. Her credit score was excellent, her references glowing, and there wasn't so much as a parking ticket in her background. The only potential weakness Lydia could identify was Nora's younger brother, Ben, who struggled with addiction and had been in and out of rehab facilities for the past 3 years, but even that seemed to work in Nora's favor. She'd been paying for his treatment out of her own pocket, demonstrating both loyalty and financial responsibility. It was maddening. Lydia had hoped to find ammunition to use against the woman who threatened her carefully laid plans for Ethan's future. Instead, she discovered that Nora Whitman was exactly what she appeared to be: intelligent, hard-working, and genuinely in love with her son, which made her even more dangerous. Lydia closed the file and leaned back in her leather chair, considering her options. Direct confrontation had failed. Ethan had made his position clear. Character assassination would be difficult given Nora's spotless record. That left only one viable approach: make Nora an offer she couldn't refuse. She picked up her phone and dialed her assistant. Schedule a lunch meeting with Nora Whitman for tomorrow, somewhere private. The Fairmont Olympics should do. Should I tell her what it's regarding, Mrs. Sterling? Tell her I'd like to discuss her future with the company. The next day, Nora arrived at the Fairmont Olympics Georgian restaurant precisely on time, dressed in her best business suit. She'd been surprised by the invitation. She'd barely spoken to Ethan's mother beyond basic pleasantries at company events. Mrs. Sterling was known for her ice-cold demeanor and surgical precision in business dealings, but Nora had assumed she was beneath the woman's notice. Lydia was already seated at a corner table positioned to ensure privacy. She studied Nora as she approached, taking in every detail. The young woman was undeniably beautiful, with an elegant bearing that suggested natural grace rather than cultivated sophistication. Her clothes were well chosen but inexpensive, and she moved with the confidence of someone comfortable in her own skin. Miss Whitman, Lydia said, rising slightly from her chair. Thank you for joining me. Mrs. Sterling, thank you for the invitation. Nora took her seat, accepting the menu from the hovering waiter. They made small talk through the appetizer course. Market trends, the Seattle weather, industry gossip. Lydia was an expert at reading people, and she watched Nora carefully. For any signs of nervousness or calculation, she found neither. The young woman was poised and articulate, answering questions directly without volunteering unnecessary information. It wasn't until the main course arrived that Lydia decided to show her hand. I suppose you're wondering why I asked you here, she began, cutting into her salmon with surgical precision. I assumed it was about work, perhaps a new project. In a manner of speaking, Lydia set down her fork and fixed Nora with her steely gaze. I'm going to be direct with you, Miss Whitman. I know about your relationship with my son. Nora's hand stilled halfway to her wineglass, but her expression remained calm. I see. I imagine you do. You're an intelligent woman, which makes this conversation easier. You understand that Ethan's position in this family comes with certain expectations, such as marriage to someone suitable, children who will carry on the family legacy, a stable foundation for the business empire we've spent generations building. Nora finally reached for her wine, taking a small sip before responding, And you believe I'm not suitable. It's nothing personal. You seem like a lovely young woman, but you must understand that Ethan's marriage isn't just about personal happiness. It's about dynasty, about preserving what we've built. He needs a wife who can move in our social circles, who understands the responsibilities that come with wealth, who can provide the right connections and background. I see. Nora's voice remained level, but something flickered in her dark eyes. And what role do you see Ethan's feelings playing in this decision? Ethan is young. He thinks with his heart rather than his head. In time, he'll understand that infatuation isn't the same as love, and that love isn't always enough to build a successful marriage. Lydia reached into her purse and withdrew a cream-colored envelope, placing it on the table between them. Which brings me to why we're really here. Nora stared at the envelope but made no move to touch it. What is that? Your future. Open it. With obvious reluctance, Nora picked up the envelope and broke the seal. Inside was a cashier's check for $1 million made out in her name. Her eyes widened, and for the first time since arriving, she looked genuinely shaken. I don't understand. I think you do. $1 million, free and clear, enough to pay off any debts, help your brother with his medical expenses, set yourself up comfortably anywhere you choose. All you have to do is disappear from Ethan's life. Clean break. No contact. No explanations. Just gone. Nora stared at the check, her hands trembling slightly. You want to pay me to leave your son? I want to offer you an opportunity to start fresh. You're young, talented, beautiful. With this money, you could go anywhere. Be anything. Why limit yourself to Seattle, to Ethan? Because I love him. Do you? Or do you love what he represents? The security, the lifestyle, the escape from financial worry. Nora's eyes flashed with anger. How dare you? I'm not judging you. I'm simply acknowledging reality. Love is a luxury that people in your position can rarely afford. This check represents freedom, real freedom. The kind that doesn't depend on anyone else's feelings or circumstances. And if I refuse? Lydia's smile was razor sharp. Then you'll be making a terrible mistake. Ethan will tire of you eventually. Men like him always do. You'll find yourself discarded, used up, with nothing to show for it but a broken heart and wasted years. Take the money now while you still have the chance to control your own destiny. Nora carefully placed the check back in the envelope and set it on the table. I need to ask you something, Mrs. Sterling. When you look at your son, do you see a person capable of making his own decisions? Do you see someone worthy of respect? I see someone who needs protection from his own naivety. And when you look at me, what do you see? Lydia's expression was predatory as she studied the young woman across from her. I see a threat to everything I've worked to build. I see someone who could destroy my family's future with good intentions and romantic notions. You don't see a person who loves your son enough to make him happy. You don't see someone who might actually be good for him. Happiness is temporary. Legacy is forever. Nora stood abruptly, leaving the envelope on the table. I won't take your money, Mrs. Sterling. And I won't leave Ethan. What we have is real, and no amount of manipulation or bribery will change that. Sight down. Lydia's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. We are not finished. Yes, we are. If you walk away from this table without that check, you'll regret it. I promise you that. Nora paused, looking back at the older woman. Is that a threat? It's a prediction. You think you know my son, but you don't understand the world he comes from. The pressure, the expectations, the weight of responsibility. You think love will be enough to sustain you through all of that, but it won't. One day, you'll wake up and realize you're drowning, and there won't be anyone there to save you. Maybe, but that's my choice to make. As Nora walked away, Lydia sat alone at the table, staring at the discarded envelope. She'd underestimated the young woman's resolve, but that was a mistake she wouldn't make again. If money wouldn't solve the problem, she'd have to find another way. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the number she was looking for. It belonged to a man who specialized in solving problems that couldn't be handled through conventional means. Their relationship went back years, built on mutual benefit and absolute discretion. It's me, she said when he answered. I need to discuss a sensitive matter. Can you meet me tonight? That evening, as Nora told Ethan about the lunch meeting and showed him the check, Lydia Sterling was in a dimly lit bar across town, discussing a very different kind of transaction. The man across from her listened without comment as she outlined her problem, his face expressionless. It needs to look natural, she concluded. An accident, maybe a mugging gone wrong, something that won't raise questions. These things take time to arrange properly, and they're expensive. Money isn't an object, but time is. I need this resolved within 2 weeks. The man nodded slowly. I'll need a week to set things up. Maybe 2. You have 1 week. And remember, if this traces back to me in any way, it won't. It never does. As they shook hands in the shadows, neither of them noticed the security camera in the corner of the bar, recording every moment of their conversation. Sometimes, the very technology that made modern crime easier also made it far more dangerous. But Lydia Sterling had never been one to worry about consequences she couldn't see. Chapter 3. The kidnapping. The first thing Nora noticed when she woke up was the smell, a mixture of motor oil, damp concrete, and something else she couldn't identify. The second thing was the duct tape across her mouth and the rope binding her wrists behind her back. The third was the crushing realization that she was no longer in her apartment. Her head throbbed where they'd hit her, and it took several moments for her vision to clear enough to make out her surroundings. She was in what appeared to be an abandoned warehouse, lying on a thin mattress in the corner of a large, empty space. Weak sunlight filtered through grimy windows high above, suggesting it was morning, though she had no idea which morning. The last thing she remembered was leaving her apartment for work 3 days ago. She'd been walking to her car in the underground parking garage when she'd heard footsteps behind her. Before she could turn around, something had struck her head, and darkness had claimed her. "She's awake." The voice came from somewhere behind her. Nora twisted as much as her bonds would allow and saw 3 men standing near a folding table covered with maps and what looked like surveillance photos. The one who'd spoken was tall and lean, with graying hair and cold blue eyes. The other 2 were younger, both built like street fighters, with the kind of casual violence that suggested they were comfortable with their chosen profession. "Good," the older man said, approaching her with measured steps. "We need to talk." He knelt down beside the mattress and studied her face with clinical detachment. "My name is Kane. These are my associates, Holt and Ramsey. We're going to be spending some time together, so I thought introductions were in order." Nora tried to speak, but the tape muffled any sound she made. Kane noticed her struggle and shook his head. "I'll remove that in a moment. But first, some ground rules. You're going to want to scream, to fight, to make demands. I understand that. It's natural. But it won't help you. And it will only make things more difficult for everyone involved. Do you understand?" Nora nodded, her dark eyes never leaving his face. "Excellent. Now, I'm going to take off the tape, and you're going to speak quietly and calmly. If you scream, it goes back on, and we'll wait another day before trying this again. Clear?" Another nod. Kane carefully peeled away the duct tape, and Nora winced as it pulled at her skin. She worked her jaw for a moment, then looked up at her captor. "Why?" she whispered, straight to the point. "I appreciate that. The why is simple. Someone wants you gone permanently." The words hit her like a physical blow. "Gone. Dead," Kane clarified with brutal honesty. The client was very specific about that. Nora's mind raced, trying to process what she was hearing. Who? Who wants me dead? That's not really your concern anymore. What matters is what happens next. And what happens next? Kane stood and walked back to the table, picking up one of the photographs. From where she lay, Nora could see it was a picture of her leaving her office building. "Originally, we were supposed to kill you and make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Stage it in the parking garage where we grabbed you. Leave your body where it would be found quickly. Clean, simple, no complications. Originally, plans change. See, when we did our research on you, we discovered something the client failed to mention." Kane held up another photo. This one, clearly taken with a telephoto lens, showed Nora in profile, and even from across the room, she could see the slight curve of her belly that had become noticeable only in the past few weeks. Her hand instinctively moved to her stomach, and Kane nodded. 16 weeks along, according to your medical records. Congratulations, by the way. Boy or girl? I don't know yet. The words came out in a whisper. Doesn't matter. What matters is that I don't kill pregnant women. Call it a character flaw, but every man has his limits. Relief flooded through Nora, followed immediately by confusion. Then why am I here? Why haven't you let me go? Because the client is still paying me to solve a problem. If I can't solve it one way, I need to find another. Kane sat down the photos and turned to face her fully, which brings us to the current situation. I don't understand. The client believes you're dead. As far as anyone knows, you disappeared from that parking garage 3 nights ago. Your car was found abandoned, your purse missing, blood on the concrete. The police are treating it as a kidnapping, possibly murder. Your boyfriend is beside himself with grief. Ethan. Nora's heart clenched as she thought about what he must be going through. You have to let me contact him. He needs to know I'm alive. That's not going to happen. At least not yet. Kane pulled a folding chair over to the mattress and sat down, his elbows resting on his knees. Here's the deal. The client wants you gone from Ethan Caldwell's life. Originally, that meant dead. But there's another way to accomplish the same goal. What way? You disappear. Permanently. New identity, new life, far away from Seattle. To everyone you've ever known, Nora Whitman died in that parking garage. That's insane. You won't do it. You will. Because the alternative is death. Maybe not today, maybe not next week, but eventually. The client has made it very clear that your continued existence in Ethan's life is unacceptable. This way, everyone gets what they want. The client gets you out of the picture, you get to live, and your baby gets to be born. Nora stared at him, trying to find some hint of mercy in his cold blue eyes. And Ethan? Ethan mourns you and moves on. Eventually, he'll find someone else, someone the client approves of. He'll have the life he was meant to have. You don't know him. He won't move on. He'll never stop looking for me. People always say that, but grief fades, and life has a way of forcing people forward whether they want to go or not. Kane stood and walked back to the table, returning with a manila envelope. Inside this envelope is everything you need for a new life. Social security number, birth certificate, driver's license, passport. There's also a bank account with $500,000, your client's final payment to ensure your cooperation. I won't take blood money. It's not blood money. Think of it as child support. The father of your child is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. This is a fraction of what the baby would inherit if Ethan knew it existed. The casual cruelty of the words made Nora sick. He has a right to know about his child. He has no rights in this situation. Neither do you. This isn't a negotiation. It's a choice between life and death. Kane dropped the envelope on the mattress beside her. You have 24 hours to decide. Tomorrow night, we'll either put you on a plane to start your new life, or we'll finish what we originally came here to do. The choice is yours. He motioned to his associates, and the three men moved toward the far end of the warehouse, leaving Nora alone with her thoughts and the envelope that represented either salvation or betrayal. As the hours passed, she thought about Ethan, about the life they'd planned together, the future that had seemed so bright just days ago. She thought about the baby growing inside her, Ethan's child, who would never know their father if she took Kane's deal. But she also thought about Kane's cold certainty that the alternative was death. Someone wanted her gone badly enough to hire professional killers. Someone with enough money and power to make her disappear without a trace. The realization of who that someone must be hit like a physical blow. Lydia Sterling. Ethan's mother had made her position clear during their lunch meeting, but Nora had never imagined the woman would go this far. As night fell, one of Kane's men brought her water and a sandwich. She ate mechanically, her mind churning through possibilities. Could she escape? The warehouse seemed secure, and even if she got away, Kane had made it clear that the threat wouldn't end there. Could she contact the police? What proof did she have? And even if they believed her, would they be able to protect her and her child from someone with Lydia Sterling's resources? The envelope sat beside her like a poisonous temptation. $500,000, a new identity, safety for her and her baby. All she had to do was let Ethan believe she was dead. By dawn, her decision was made. Kane appeared at her side as the first light filtered through the windows. Well, I need guarantees, Nora said, her voice stronger than she felt. I need to know that Ethan will be safe, that you won't hurt him to ensure his compliance with whatever story you tell. The client has no interest in harming Ethan. The whole point is to protect him from what they see as a destructive relationship. And you'll make sure my brother gets the medical help he needs. Anonymous donations to cover his treatment. That can be arranged. Nora closed her eyes, feeling a piece of her soul die. Then I'll take your deal. But I have one condition. You're not in a position to make conditions. This one you'll accept because it serves your client's interests. She looked up at Kane with eyes that had aged years in the past few days. I want Ethan to think I chose to leave. I want him to believe I took money and ran. It will hurt him, but it will also help him hate me. Hatred is easier to recover from than grief. Kane studied her for a long moment, something like respect flickering in his cold blue eyes. That's surprisingly practical of you, and cruel. I love him too much to leave him mourning a ghost for the rest of his life. Then we have a deal. As Kane's men prepared to transport her to the airport, Nora took one last look at the warehouse that had been her prison. Somewhere across the city, Ethan was probably still searching for her, still hoping for her safe return. She pressed her hand to her stomach, feeling the slight swell where their child grew. I'm sorry, she whispered, not sure if she was apologizing to Ethan, to the baby, or to herself. But survival required sacrifice. And sometimes love meant letting go. The plane tickets in her new identity were for Portland, Oregon. Close enough to feel like home, far enough to stay hidden. As the car pulled away from the warehouse, carrying her toward a life that felt like death, Nora Whitman closed her eyes and tried to imagine a future where this choice would make sense. She failed. Chapter 4. Survival and Exile. The name on her new driver's license was Elise Morgan. The apartment Kane's people had arranged for her in Portland was small but clean, furnished with the kind of generic furniture that came from rental companies. It felt like a hotel room where someone might stay forever, temporary and sterile, lacking any trace of personality or warmth. Elise, now she had to remember that, stood at the window of her new home, watching the rain fall on unfamiliar streets. 3 weeks had passed since the warehouse, and she was still adjusting to the reality of her new existence. Every morning, she woke up expecting to be back in Seattle, back in her real life. Every morning, the truth hit her anew. She was dead to the world she'd known, dead to Ethan. The pregnancy was progressing normally, according to the doctor Kane had arranged for her to see. Dr. Rebecca Lynn was a kind woman who asked no questions about Elise Morgan's sudden appearance in Portland or her lack of medical history beyond what the fake documents provided. The babies, as it turned out, were healthy and developing on schedule. Twins. The ultrasound had revealed that, surprised during her second visit, 2 heartbeats, 2 tiny forms growing inside her, Ethan's children, who would never know their father's name. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd been running from one threat to her life, only to discover she was carrying 2 lives that made her exile even more complete. There was no going back now, no way to explain a sudden reappearance after death with 2 children in tow. Kane had been thorough in creating her new identity. Elise Morgan had a work history as a freelance graphic designer, which allowed her to work from home and avoid too many questions about her past. The bank account he promised was real, the money sitting there like 30 pieces of silver. She tried not to touch it at first, living off her savings, but pregnancy had its own demands, and practical concerns eventually outweighed her principles. She'd established a routine of sorts. Morning walks when the weather permitted, doctor's appointments, grocery shopping, and long hours at her computer designing logos and websites for small businesses. It was honest work that kept her mind occupied and provided enough income that she wouldn't have to rely entirely on the blood money. But the evenings were the hardest. When the work was done and the apartment fell silent, there was nothing to distract her from the magnitude of what she'd lost. She'd taken to watching the Seattle news online, hungry for any glimpse of her former life. Ethan appeared occasionally in business segments, looking hollow-eyed and older than his 28 years. His mother, Lydia, was often at his side during public appearances, her hand resting possessively on his arm. The official story of Nora Whitman's disappearance had evolved over the weeks. Initially treated as a kidnapping, it had gradually shifted to suspected murder when no ransom demands materialized. Then, 6 weeks after her disappearance, Kane had kept his promise about making Ethan hate her memory. An envelope had arrived at Ethan's office, postmarked from Mexico and containing Nora's engagement ring, the one Ethan had given her just days before the kidnapping, along with a note in handwriting that perfectly matched her own. The letter explained that she'd grown tired of living a lie, that she'd realized she couldn't marry someone just for their money, and that she'd taken a payment from his mother to disappear permanently. Elise had watched Ethan's press conference about the discovery with tears streaming down her face. His pain was visible even through the carefully controlled corporate demeanor. But underneath it, she could see the anger beginning to take hold, the hurt of betrayal mixing with grief in a way that would poison his memories of their time together. It was exactly what she'd asked for, and it was destroying her. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the screen, her hands resting on her growing belly. "I'm so sorry." But Kane had been right about one thing. Survival required sacrifice. The twins were moving now, little flutters that reminded her constantly that this wasn't just about her anymore. Whatever Lydia Sterling was capable of, Elise couldn't risk exposing her children to that threat. A knock at her door interrupted her brooding. Elise wiped her eyes and checked the peephole, seeing a young woman about her own age holding a casserole dish and smiling uncertainly. "Hi," the woman said when Elise opened the door. "I'm Sarah Tate from 3B. I know you've been here a few weeks, and I wanted to welcome you to the building. That's very kind of you. I'm Elise Morgan. Nice to meet you. I brought you some lasagna, my grandmother's recipe. Moving can be so stressful, and I thought you might appreciate a home-cooked meal. Elise accepted the dish gratefully, touched by the unexpected kindness. Thank you. Would you like to come in for coffee? Sarah's face lit up. I'd love to. Over the next hour, Elise learned that Sarah was a nurse at Oregon Health and Science University, originally from a small town in eastern Oregon, and possessed of the kind of warm, open personality that made instant friendship seem possible. She chatted easily about the neighborhood, recommended local businesses, and seemed genuinely interested in Elise's story about being a freelance designer new to Portland. Are you expecting? Sarah asked finally. Her nurse's eye, having noticed what Elise's loose clothing couldn't entirely hide. Yes, twins. Actually, how exciting. Is your husband relocating here too? The question was innocent enough, but it hit Elise like a physical blow. She fumbled for an answer that wouldn't invite more questions. It's complicated. I'm doing this on my own. Sarah's expression immediately softened with sympathy. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pry. It's okay. It's just recent. Well, if you need anything, and I mean anything, I'm just down the hall. Portland has some excellent single-parent support groups, and the hospital where I work has wonderful prenatal programs. After Sarah left, Elise sat in her empty apartment with the lasagna warming in the oven and something like hope stirring in her chest. Maybe it was possible to build a new life here. Maybe she could create something good for her children, even if it meant living a lie. The months that followed took on a rhythm. Elise's work grew steadily as word spread about her design skills. She developed friendships with Sarah and a few other neighbors. She attended prenatal classes and prepared for the arrival of the twins with a mixture of excitement and terror. But late at night, when insomnia drove her to her computer, she continued her secret vigil over Ethan's life. She watched him throw himself into work with an intensity that worried her. She saw him at charity events and business conferences, always alone, always maintaining a careful distance from anyone who might threaten his emotional walls. Lydia Sterling appeared frequently in society photographs, often accompanied by elegant young women who Elise recognized as potential daughter-in-law candidates. The woman was methodically working to fill the void in Ethan's life with someone of her own choosing, someone who would never threaten her control over the family empire. In her 8th month, Elise's contractions started during a particularly violent thunderstorm. Sarah drove her to the hospital through sheets of rain, holding her hand and assuring her that everything would be fine. The labor was intense but manageable. And when it was over, Elise held 2 perfect baby boys with dark hair,